were in the Engedi Reserve and stopped under the tree by the dry wadi. We spoke about what we know once was and what could be again. What could be again, in spite of the present. Then you went and you found the water. Look at this place. This was a very upscale restaurant with tables here and live music and good food coming out of the kitchen. And people would come down here in the cool of the day. The Dead Sea came right up to this wall. Right up to this wall. Just there where the steps are. And the sun setting and the colors and the Purple Mountain's majesty. And this was a go-to place for lots and lots of people. There was a runway here for airplanes. The planes that would go from London to Bombay. And they couldn't go all at once, and so they would stop, right? And they would stop right here. And in the middle of the desert, you could be entertained and get back on your plane and fly up further into Turkey and go. And it was just tremendous. And look around a little bit now. It would be hard to find a place more wasted than this one. Never mind the camel. He wants to give us a ride. It would be a hard time. He sits at the gas station across the road looking for company. A place more wasted than this one. All right, the sea has receded. You can't even see it anymore. And it's left behind an absolutely barren and salty and unproductive plateau. Can't grow anything out there if you want to. There's a double barbed wire fence here. I don't see the signs right now. There are some minefields. Oh, okay. And just this side of it, you'll once in a while see the Israeli patrol jeeps guarding the border. Yeah, you'll see a few. You've got a restaurant that has borne the brunt of some shelling. That hole isn't supposed to be there, right? That's a shell come through. Yeah. And you saw the sign coming in, the red sign that said no entrance, danger of collapse. Yes. You saw that one. You came in anyway.
Yeah, we did. We followed our shepherd.
It's the far. I knew there was nothing here. Right?
You were the leader.
It's over there, and look what happened. Look what happened. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
How long ago? What year?
Over the years, since it's 1948, it was still working up pretty well.
Since 1948.
At 48, and then it's just deteriorating. Yeah. All of which reminds me of the book of Ezekiel. The book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel was a young, energetic, capable, competent seminarian priest who was...
Can we hold up a second? Hey, we'll do all of that when you finish. This is profound. I really want us to hear this.
He's not going anywhere. I can guarantee he won't go anywhere. All right. If he does, he'll be at the gas station on the other side of the road. Ezekiel, a young, very promising, very kind of just very promising fellow, and when he was just getting old enough to be somebody with a life, he was snatched from his homeland by the Babylonians. Before the temple was destroyed, it was an early snatching. The worst thing that can happen in the ancient Near East is to be exiled from your land and family, and taken out to Babylon, never to return. He had visions of what was happening here, and the visions include destruction and then something else. So one of the visions he has is this. He sees the temple standing before Babylon, before Nebuchadnezzar destroys it. And the glory of the God of Israel resting in the Holy of Holies. It's the Ark of the Covenant with cherubs, winged beings on top, made out of gold. They come to life. And the glory goes up from the cherub, moves off of the dwelling place, out to the threshold of the temple, heading eastward. And then verse 18 of chapter 10, departs, stands over the threshold, out toward the entrance of the eastern gate of the temple compound. And then in chapter 11, goes up from the midst of the city, out over the mountain which is east of the city, the Mount of Olives. You can see it from the rooftop of the Gloria Hotel, probably the Knights Palace too, that barrier separating Jerusalem from the wilderness of Judea and all of this harsh, hard, dry land beyond. And God, leaving the temple, heading eastward, the people left Jerusalem and were headed eastward against their will. They were captured and they were being sent into exile. To Babylon, across an 800-mile expanse of the North Arabian Desert, just awful land. Most of them never to come back. Maybe their children did. But they didn't. And some would say that God, in response to their deserving to be exiled, left the temple, went to the top of the Mount Olives, and waved at them as they went. See you later, guys. I think not. I think that God is willingly and intentionally and volitionally choosing to exile himself and go with them. Yeah? Now, of course, we know he doesn't dwell in either one exclusively, right? But his presence is, like his presence came with them from Egypt, his presence is now going with them into exile. And then Ezekiel sees visions of the temple destroyed, and it's 70 years. And where's life going? And he has a vision of the temple rebuilt. And this is the last half of the book, chapters 40, 41 through 48. The temple being rebuilt. Whether the vision that he has is the temple that was built by Zerubbabel, whether it is a temple not built yet.
Right.
I'll let you debate those back home. All right? I'll let you debate those back home. Y'all can handle that one. All right? But what he does have is this. He has language of it being rebuilt, and the temple is rebuilt, and it's now just a building. And in chapter 43, he leads me to the gate facing eastward, and I see the glory of the God of Israel coming back from the way of the east. The voice like the sound of many waters, the earth shone with his glory. Like the vision I saw when he left, now he's coming back. You know, the Bible does this. It has language of the world being created, and then the language, the world being decreated during the flood. Then the world created again after the flood, after the dry land appears. We have the vision of Joshua coming in and the vision of the people going out. And now they're coming back again from the same direction Joshua came, from the same direction Elijah and Elisha came into the land. And you know what? Every single time we read about Jesus coming into Jerusalem, it's from the east, the same way. The same direction that the glory of God himself was coming back to fill the temple. The Spirit lifted me up and brought me to the inner court, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. Ezekiel doesn't end his vision there, because if he did, all you've got is what you started with before. With, as you will, a local holy ground, one building on top, and God dwelling in one place, working with just one people. That puts you back where you were, but Ezekiel's vision doesn't stop there. And so in chapter 47, something happens to go out again. He brings me back, water flowing from the threshold eastward, coming out of the temple eastward. Guys, there's no spring on top of the Temple Mount. There's no possible way this can happen by itself. It doesn't exist. Water flowing out, the house faced east, the water flowing out from under, kind of circling around. He brings me around by the north gate, around to the east gate, and water trickling out into the Kidron Valley. We'll be looking at it tomorrow, the next day, and the next day. And a man goes out with a measuring hand. He goes 1,000 cubits down the valley. That's 1,500 feet. The water is ankle deep, 1,000 more cubits, knee deep, 1,000 more cubits, waist deep, 1,000 more cubits. By now you're around the corner of the Mount of Olives in the wilderness. And the water is so deep, you can't even swim in it or cross it. Have you seen this, he says. Then he brings him back to the bank of the river. And now you're in the wilderness of Judah. You've been to the wilderness. You've seen it in the springtime. It's a little bit green. Last weekend, Saturday before you came, this is the Kidron Valley in the wilderness. I was in the wilderness on the Kidron Valley. It was as dry as a bone. We walked across it. It was as dry as a bone. It smelled like raw sewage coming out of Jerusalem today. Look what happens here. Brings me back to the river, returns on either bank trees, one side or the other. He said, these waters go to the eastern region into the Arava. That's the name for the flatland around the Dead Sea. And they go toward the sea, and being made to flow into the sea, the waters of the sea, this one, become fresh. Every living creature that swarms in every living place will live there. All right? It will come about that there will be fishermen from En-Gedi to Eneglaim, which is south of Masada, the saltiest spot possible. Fishermen spreading nets. Fish according to their kinds. That's right out of Genesis 1. That's right out of the Garden of Eden. Fish according to their kinds. The river on the bank on one side or the other will grow trees of all kinds for food. Leaves will not wither. Fruit will not fail. They will bear every month. The water flows from the sanctuary. The fruit will be for food, the leaves for healing. And this thing is going to become much more lush than the Sea of Galilee that you saw this past week. And the water coming out of the temple, the living water coming out of the temple. All right? An image that Jesus uses. Now, I'm going to leave aside all the hermeneutical questions about when and how and image or reality. All those I'm going to set aside, okay? Because we can debate them for a while. I do want to notice this, 3 things, all right? Number 1, what turns this place, represented by this building that we're sitting in, what turns it into a wholesome Eden, like life should be, is 3 things. Number 1, living water coming from God himself. Number 2, living water flowing through a very dry and thirsty and wasted landscape. And number 3, that water heals and gives life to everything that needs it. All right? And it doesn't matter if that landscape is the one you're looking at or if it's South Texas. A land, well, we don't care about the land as much as we care about the people on the land, right? That has communities that are just gasping for something. Yeah. Yeah. And Ezekiel sees that the living word of God is going to solve it. It's going to speak to it. When you open it up, the very next prophet is Jesus, basically. And he says, come to me. Rivers of living water comes out of you too. Right. Comes out of you too, yeah. So think about the landscape. Think about the possibilities that this thing once can be again. And the possibilities that you have as well. Yes.
Will be. Can you take us full circle to Revelation 21?
Revelation 21 speaks in creation language, doesn't it? Revelation 21 is creation language. It's the same kind of language that we have in Genesis 1. It's the same kind of language we have the prophet speaking about a place where people can live in whole lives. It's language that Ezekiel talks about. It's language that and Jesus anticipates when he says, you have living water in you. It's language we read briefly at Caesarea. Remember, no sea? Representing all of that stuff that represents the grunge of life on every level. And the first earth, first heaven passed away. A new heaven, a new earth. That's an earthy term. That's a real term. This is reality, yeah? The holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for your husband. Look, the dwelling place of God is among people, he will dwell with them. You know, that's the key. That's the key. The details of place. Earlier he talked about, you know, my Father's house. The key is dwelling with, yeah? He calls you because he wants you, yes.
What's the passage goes on to describe it? The river
Ah,
and the two trees of life on each side of the bank. Is it 22? It's got to be 22 maybe.
For some reason, I'd see the description of Jerusalem. 22. He showed me a river of life, a river of the water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of God and from the Lamb. In the middle of its street, on either side of the river, was the tree of life, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, yielding fruit for every month. The leaves of the tree for healing of the nations. No longer any curse. His name will be on their foreheads. Why are we so obsessed about the 666 going to be here? His name is on our forehead, it says. That's what we should be obsessed about, right? His name on our forehead. No longer any night, no need for any lamp. He will illumine and reign forever and ever. The words are faithful and true. Yeah.
Full circle.
Yes. Yep.
And all God's people said?
Amen. Let it be. All right. Okay. That was more than 15 minutes. I apologize.
Worth every minute of it.
I apologize.